Want to stop juggling spreadsheets, calendars, and a dozen apps just to run your rentals? Lodgify makes it easy. It's an all-in-one toolkit for hosts. Build a direct booking website, automate guest messaging, and keep all your channels in sync. Running your rental business your way has never been simpler. And for Good Morning Hospitality listeners, you can get 20% off any yearly plan with code GMH20. Just check the link in the show notes to get started today.
Welcome to Good Morning Outdoors, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the outdoor hospitality industry. From campgrounds and RV parks to glamping, outdoor resorts, adventure travel, and ecotourism, we'll be discussing all things outdoor travel and hospitality, so join us on Good Morning Outdoors every Thursday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome back to another week of Good Morning Outdoors. For people who are tuning in live and seeing us today, you may notice a new co-host. Matt is gone this week. He is at a conference, jealous with some amazing folks in the industry, a little bit of a more exclusive event, so to speak. And we're super excited to get him back next week, next Thursday, to talk about all of the great things that happened. But today we have an incredible special guest joining us, somebody that I have known for a while now, really since almost my start in this industry. Christine Taylor is joining us today. Christy, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. I don't look like Matt. You think they know this?
Maybe just slightly different.
It's just a little. Yeah, Alex and I have known each other for a while. I've been in this industry for a while. I guess you're almost born in it. My parents bought their first campground when I was 9. That one was part of the Yogi franchise. So that was my very first job, was dressing up as Yogi Bear. Excellent.
One of mine too. It's like a lot of people I know got their start there.
I assume you did better than me because I got paid in rolls of quarters that I put in their arcades. So I'm assuming it was a little bit better for you. And my parents owned several campgrounds. And then we get to present day, and I went to law school, and I decided I wanted to be an attorney that focused on this. And I also, because I, definitely have so much free time, owned a campground with my mother in New York as well. That's part of the KOA franchise.
Yeah, I was going to say you and your mom, who's a real estate agent in the industry, one of the most well-known. You guys both kind of cover both avenues from law to real estate, which two very important sides of the transaction in outdoor hospitality. You bought into the campground, and as you said, your mom's owned several. And then more recently, you actually ended up changing law firms in the industry as well. So a lot of big moves happening. Do you just want to tell us a little bit about Kohlberg Segala, where you ended up currently?
So I left a regional law firm and I went to a national law firm. So we have about 500 attorneys now throughout the United States. And that was, that was frankly the main motivator for me moving, is I wanted to be able to help current clients in more of their locations and other people who approached me in states that I wasn't admitted in. Myself personally, I'm admitted in 5 states. That's a lot of continuing legal education. So I didn't want to have to do more of those. So I am lucky now to have joined what was a hospitality practice that was pretty large anyway. But now I get to specialize in my little sliver of the outdoor hospitality piece.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely. And before we dive into today's news, which a lot of these stories I'm super excited to get your take on, Chrissy, because a lot of them are focused on areas where, or companies that you know well, from KOA to data covering the industry. You're somebody who likes to get into the nitty gritty details like me. So I think this is going to be a great one. But before we jump in, for anybody tuning in live, let us know where you're coming from. And if you have any comments, we do kind of have our resident lawyer in today, guest hosting. So if you have legal questions or things you're curious about, please let us know and drop a comment, and we'll be sure to answer them live on the broadcast. But the first story we're going to cover today comes courtesy in Woodall's, but it is covering the 2025 North American KOA report. This is something that has been released for years and years and years now. I don't even know when the first date they released this was, but this has really become a staple when it comes to talking about data in the industry. And there's some really great insights in this. I think kind of looking from COVID era moving forward, and really what's changing as far as the camping trends go. So Campgrounds of America put out this report and really talking about camping preferences by households and really trying to understand all of these new influx of campers that came in during the COVID-19 pandemic. Are they going to stay? And is this something that, is a strengthening of the industry, and what's kind of happening? So really interesting chart, if we could put it up on the screen, talking about camping preferences by households, really looking at the breakdown of tents, RV sites, or RV campers, as well as cabins and glamping. And, it's sort of, I thought, interesting, the number of expansion we've seen, particularly in tents and glamping, and sort of a little bit of a reduction in RV and RV travel, from this data, at least. Christine, is this something that you're seeing at your campground and something you see when talking with clients, or how do you feel about this data and how the trends are sort of shaping up here?
It doesn't entirely surprise me because it just has to do with the aging of the populace and the kind of the new people coming in. So the traditional, for lack of a better term, boomer model was a lot of RVing. Like, that's how I grew up, right? We took our RV, we drove up and down the coast, we did all those type of things. And I think that's reflective of what people were looking for then. I think that camping has gone a little bit more experiential now, and that kind of glamping piece, whether solely glamping facility or glamping units on a campground, I think that's more appealing. Tent has always kind of been the gateway to camping, if you will. It's a low cost barrier of entry. So it doesn't surprise me that there's even growth in tents, because I find as more people wanted to test out camping, it was a good way to do that. I also find that millennials and some Gen Z, they're very into the getting back to nature type of piece of it. And I think that's kind of reflective of that too. Like, van life became a really big thing that was like unheard of when I was a child. So I think that kind of reflective of that trend as well. And let's be honest, RVs are very expensive. Right. They're very expensive. Like, if you get one of the super high end ones, they cost as much as a small house in parts of these countries. So that doesn't surprise me overall. And I think that in 2020, a lot of people bought campers. And if you look even on Facebook Marketplace now and you want to buy a used camper, there's like hundreds of them. So I don't think we're getting as many new RVers in as we had. We had a big old bump, and now people are kind of shifting again.
Really great insights. I definitely can really relate to the experiential side of things as somebody myself. There's that like nostalgia feel with tent camping. I would be more of a tent camper personally over an RV or something like that for the same reasons you talked about. You combine it with things like fishing and hiking and all kinds of outdoor activities and amenities, and it makes a really unique experience for people to really do that. But what I also found interesting was with the rise of glamping that we see kind of through there, people do have some disposable income. But as you said, they're just not willing to put it all into another house or a second mortgage into an RV and have to do the maintenance and figure out, well, where am I going to store this? And if I only take it out a couple of trips a year, is it really worth it for me to have an RV? And I think we've seen RV rental services pop up, RV Share and Cruise America and all of those types of places have become more prevalent through those rental programs. But then also glamping, where people say, I'll pay for a couple of $100s a night to come in and spend on a really incredible weekend, instead of having the RV for the whole year and not knowing what to do with it.
Well, it's a different appeal, right? Like your right. Camper isn't necessarily your every weekend camper. They're more like I want a hotel in nature camper. So I think you're appealing to a different group. I think that what this really should do is that the people who are late to market right now, so maybe some of those mom and pop campground owners who have been a bit resistant to glamping, it really should signal for them that any campground now should probably have one or two glamping type units. It's money that's there, and they should go for it.
I'm always a big fan of like, look at the low sites that you have that aren't generating any money because you can't get a nice RV in them and tent campers don't want them. There could be inland sites, maybe tucked back in the woods. Those are perfect for glamping units, especially having that tucked away, secluded feel. What RVers and tent campers don't want sometimes is what the glamping customer actually wants, which is really nice because you can kind of address your property and find those holes to come in and fill in, which I think is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd be surprised how quickly you can turn that worst site into your most profitable one by just plopping something on it.
Exactly. Our next story really kind of complements. We're talking a lot of data today for people who can't kind of maybe want to get a read on where things are going, which is super exciting to me. I think it's great because obviously we're both involved in the operation of campgrounds in some form or fashion, but also have some outward external experience looking at these things as well. Go RVing in conjunction with RVIA also puts out some really great reporting. Obviously, Go RVing being the public consumer facing marketing arm of the RV industry. They put out what's called their RV owner demographic profile and really trying to look at the millennial and Gen Z owners and campers, as you touched on, Chrissy. Campers are becoming so diverse in this, information from Hispanic campers, African Americans, Asian, LGBTQ. It seems like, this is like 30% of all campers today, especially younger folks, like both of us, kind of under 40. It's becoming more diverse than ever, which I think is a really great sign. And they also highlighted young families are a lot of times the people that are buying into travel trailers or buying the fifth wheels and the things that, yes, cost more, but also provide extra space for these folks. I'll throw it your way and ask again, is this something that you're seeing at your campgrounds or how do you sort of take this data and what does this tell you about where the industry is going moving forward?
Well, it tells me that camping is still something we can do even when the economy squeezes you. We owned a campground through the last recession. And what it did was kind of change people's travel plans. And even as we saw in the pandemic, I joked that camping was pandemic proof, but really what it is it's kind of recession stable because people who would fly somewhere are now driving closer in their locality. Or if they don't want to drive, maybe they go get a seasonal site because they save on that gas. It's changing how we do vacations. I fly really often. I often bring a child with me to my work conferences, and it is very expensive to fly now. And flying is kind of a crapshoot, and it's not great. And, hotels are still pretty expensive. And then these kind of things that we were paying to go to, whether it was an amusement park or something else, they're all kind of gone up in price. And you feel a bit nickeled and dimed. I find for a small family, if you go to a campground and all of their stuff is included in the price you paid per night, that's great. Like campgrounds have, activities or live music or water parks or all of these type of things. And the last appeal of a camper is it's your own dirt. Like I brought my 7-month-old with me to the Campground Solutions Summit West conference, and I wouldn't let her crawl on the ground because I don't know where my hotel room ground has been and how clean it is. But would I let my daughter crawl in my camper? Yes, because that's my dirt. I know how clean it is. So I think for families, especially if they were still a little hesitant about germs and whatnot as a result of the pandemic, like campers feel safe. It's my stuff. I know how clean this is. And when you have small kids, that takes one of those like mental things you have to think about away from you because I have their stuff in there. I know that it's clean. I think that's good. And then I think the last part is security. Campgrounds feel secure. I still see at our campground, people will be like, bye, child. And their kid just like rides their bike up and down the road. I mean, I find that people are now even hesitant to do that in their own neighborhoods. So I think camping still provides that safety to parents, whether it's false or not, who knows? But I think that's why camping is still so appealing to people who are having kids. I think the shift is that it's not so much Gen Z as it is older millennials is because we waited longer to have kids. So I think that is part of the shift, is that we're older parents than our parents were. So I think that accounts for some of the disparity between younger millennials and older millennials.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And as you mentioned, even, younger families look for things like the activities and preferences and the kind of things around the campground too. To your point of it's about entertainment. As somebody who, I had my start at a Jellystone. You're obviously very familiar with both Jellystone and KOA. Both of those franchises provide all of those types of activities and amenities and things to just keep the family entertained, and where mom and dad can actually just get a little bit of a break. And I think that the things that not only occupy the campground itself, but the things that surround it in the community. What's the festival or the event or the attraction I can go take my kids at for the day? It's always been important, but I think especially today, it's more important than ever, especially this data highlighted a lot of technology being ways in which people are obviously finding information, from social media to your website to really doing the research prior to making that trip, to say, I don't want to get here and have my expectations be disappointing and not be what I thought I was going to get. And I think that research component, looking at the attractions, looking at what's going on, and you highlighting that as the park owner, has become incredibly important. Are you seeing similar?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, even if you talk to people who specifically do the marketing for campground, that's the kind of data that they're now trying to drive. Like, you can find the local event, because it's just, if it's in the area, that's just kind of another add-on. I mean, for better or worse, we are now people who are used to being entertained all the time. We carry little computers around with us. I don't know how to sit and do nothing anymore. Camping at least provides a way for me to do something that isn't staring at a screen. But I also conversely think that technology and adapting it is also very important. We are now entering that there are now people who are adults who don't know a life before the internet, right? Like, that's where we're at. I joke that when we owned our first campground, when you sent a survey out to people, it was paper. Like, we had to shove them in envelopes and mail them out. Now someone can give me a 1-star from my campground. They can still physically be on my campground. I give you a 1-star review. So I think being adapted to technology is very important right now for campground owners, because that's what the camper is looking at now. That's what I do. I check everything out on an app or whatever. I want to know. I'm not stepping into anything blind anymore. I get to look at everything before I ever set foot on the property.
On the KOA side as well, we've hit on glamping a little bit so far in this episode. We're going to touch a little bit about the Terramore Outdoor Resort, which is obviously a KOA-owned glamping brand. There was a story that recently came out with Landscape Architecture magazine, just talking about the construction of this. And obviously, neither one of us are architects to really get into that side of it. But I thought that especially bringing you on, and you deal a lot with glamping operators as well, in addition to campground folks. And obviously, you are a KOA franchisee as well. Tell me a little bit about, just for starters, give people some background on, maybe why KOA did this, or how they got into this glamping side of the business, and how you've really been incorporating glamping into your own property. I think that is kind of a unique discussion as we look at all of the data we just covered with younger travelers and being more connected to technology, people kind of transitioning maybe a little bit out of RVing and diversifying a little bit into tent camping and glamping. How do you see Terramore kind of fitting into the landscape, and how have you begun to kind of incorporate glamping into your own property?
Yeah, I mean, wow, that's a lot of those are some heavy questions.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm heavy hitting when we get a guest host. We gotta drive it in hard.
Well, I mean, I think so. KOA as a franchise, this is actually the third KOA that my family has, but they've had some internal initiatives that I'm not sure the general populace knows about, but they've been focused for a long time, even from the campgrounds, on inventive experiences and green experiences. And I think Terramore was kind of marrying those two ideas that were already in the franchise system into a unique property. So they spent a lot of time looking at what was environmentally friendly and bringing that into that property, that specific one that was flagged in that article. And they already had kind of glamping units that, depending on what level franchise you are, journey, holiday, or resort, there actually is a requirement to have so many types of rental units. So that's always been a kind of a piece of their puzzle. So I think this was, hey, what if we just focused on those two aspects that we were doing a little bit at campgrounds and made it into this bigger thing? And I find that glamping kind of goes one or two ways right now. It either goes super nature, like we're going to plop it in, you're going to feel like you're alone in nature, all by yourself, get back to the woods. That's like the one avenue. Or it's the, hey, we're super high tech and we're just like a hotel that also happens to let you have campfires outside. So we're going to really focus on the tech thing. What I love about like outdoor hospitality as an umbrella is that I say that your property can kind of be whatever you want it to be. And I think that that is kind of demonstrative of that. So, for example, in mine, we're kind of riding the line. So we have full park Wi-Fi because people, travel and work all the time. I travel and work all the time. And then we also haven't filled every green space with a campsite. We've kept separation. We've kept trees, even though branches come down in the rain, because we want that nature piece. So we're slow growing and intentionally growing our rental and glamping side. The campground that we had a lot of the traditional rental, like renting a travel trailer or things like that. And we put in the 2 park model cabins last year with real furniture and bigger kitchens and things like that to try to appeal to that more higher end. The next thing we want to do is to focus more on that experiential side of glamping and the units that, whether, that's a dome or, something like that, something that the average person wouldn't have already had an experience staying in. We are trying to move away more from the traditional cabin on our property, only because I think it's been done. Every other campground we've had before, we had lots of cabins and they were rented and it did appeal to the same type of guest. But I think that you pull some of that younger crowd by making it, for lack of a better term, an Instagram moment. Having like, I'd have to say this cool, crazy looking, don't they look at this? And the best marketing and the freest marketing I can have is other people sharing that kind of thing organically. So that's kind of where we're moving, is to try to move towards those. And I think that you have to be adaptive to the market, and it's okay to try some things and see how it goes. And, you can grab into the glamping market with different price entry points, like whether that's a canvas tent, I'd say that's on the lower end side of an economic lift, or there are some crazy high-tech spaceship looking park models now that are pretty awesome. So I think that's kind of what I'm reflecting on, is driving them there for an experience.
Completely agree. And I love that within the glamping space, it's all become intentional, right? Where the goal sort of RV park past, if you were looking at constructing things, was how do we fit as many RV sites as possible into this given plot of land? And obviously making sure that you had all the utilities, the RVs that came into the property were able to fit. But it was really a numbers game of trying to, what are the few amenities I'm going to put in to draw people here, whether that's a swimming pool or a playground, and do the activities to make it a fun family camping environment. But it was really just, how do I pack the sites? Where with glamping, and even with the Terramore project, they took what I think was around 100 sites and brought it down to about 60, which it's more of an intentional feel of, okay, we're not going to need to fit as many units as possible. We're going to be able to charge more per night for these things. We're going to be able to make the accommodations stand out and really have that sense of place and be more experiential in nature. And I think that the intentionality element of it is something that I really love to see, because it means we're giving a better product as a camping industry into the market, rather than just worrying about how many RVs can I cram in my campground at any one time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that you also kind of flagged for me something we were talking about earlier, that there's a campground for everyone, right? So I think it allows some creativity to seep into your operations. And you can kind of pick the clientele that you're looking for by the features and the property you've designed. So I think that's fun, that we don't have to be the same as, the campground 5 minutes down the road. For me, we can be different and both be profitable and just be pulling different clientele.
All right, Chrissy, I'm going to give you a chance as we start to wrap up here to talk about your NCA presentation called Things You Should Ask Your Attorney. Now, for folks who don't know, that's the Northeast Campground Association Conference. This was, a couple of months ago now? I feel like this could have been like yesterday or also 6 months ago. Why don't you just kind of give us obviously, we don't have time to do the full rundown of that presentation, but give us the high points for folks who are involved in this space, who maybe they have an attorney that's not you, or maybe they have legal issues that come up. What are some things that people should sort of be mindful of? And what was it that you talked about at this conference?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I can talk forever, and this would be another 2 hours all on its own.
Right.
So let me try to do the greatest hits for you. So the number one thing that I talk about nearly everywhere I go is employment law and employees. This is because of a reflection of the economy. When the economy gets stressed, then former employees think you have lots of money, and they suddenly have all of these problems that never existed before. And it's something to keep an eye on. Campgrounds were specifically notoriously bad at doing employment things correctly. And it is still a transition to figuring out what do you mean I really have to pay them for that work? What do you mean I really have to do this? My two favorite hot button issues for that are volunteers for-profit businesses are federally illegal. You are making money and you are a for-profit business. You are not allowed to have volunteers ever. No exception. So, that one tends to be pretty upsetting for people. And then the other one is, just because I pay somebody a salary doesn't necessarily mean they're exempt from overtime. There are specific duties and specific salary thresholds we have to be meeting for people to be exempt from overtime. And then I guess the last one is work campers, the traditional bartering move. No bueno. Because if they're not reporting their site as income, they are essentially a volunteer, which I just told you is illegal. The other thing that happens,
not to mention the liability protections too, when it comes to work campers. I think I've heard it a million times too. Just the general feeling of like, look, if any employee is working, just pay them for the work. That's the simplest way to avoid all of that. And frankly, get them on the books. Yeah.
It's the easiest way, because if you get turned into a Department of Labor later, you're paying what you should have paid them. You're paying fines and penalties. And in some cases, there's even criminal charges. And I always joke that if I'm going to go to jail, it should not be for mispaying an employee. So that's that shtick. The other thing that inevitably is going nowhere is injuries. So whether that's your employee getting injured or your guest getting injured, we should be having rules and policies for all of that. You should be asking your attorney about what you can do up front to kind of help lessen the impact of those type of lawsuits. That's kind of the important piece there. And then just my fun, important fact in personal injury is the person who goes and investigates the injury should be a person who is trained on how to speak to the injured guest, because we can't say, I'm sorry. I have a resting smile face and my natural reaction is to tell people I'm sorry all the time. But I'm sorry can be used as a statement against your interest. So you don't ever want to apologize for something happening to somebody, because they could turn around and use that against you in court, which is not fun. So that fun tidbit. What was the other things? Oh, guest removal. Guests are great until they're not. And you should have thought about how we will remove them. I joke, my husband probably doesn't love this, but I say it's like a marriage. I want to know that I still have the availability to get divorced if necessary. So that's what guest removal is like. So that could be paperwork up front. That could be knowing what state law applies to you to help you remove people. All of that is very specific and very important. And then I think the last thing, go ahead.
I was going to say, Chrissy, correct me if I'm wrong too, with guest removal, we typically in the camping and outdoor hospitality space want to avoid the term of tenants, right?
Absolutely.
Probably in all circumstances.
Yeah.
Again, you tell me if I'm wrong, but for the most part,
you're
even
great.
in a lot of seasonal operations or even long-term operations, parks who operate all year round, most of the time, these are not folks who are living there, or we should be trying to prevent them from establishing residency.
Yeah, so they should be what we call a licensee, and this works in most states. Asterisks. There are some states that have specific statutes that are like, when so-and-so has been on your property for X amount of days, they're this, and X amount of days, they're this. California is one of those. So you need this blanket language is not helpful in California, where you have a statute that counters it. But generally, they're merely a licensee. So why you want them to be a licensee is license are revocable at will. So what that means is that if I revoke your permission to be here, I revoke your license, then you suddenly become a trespasser. And then everybody kind of knows what to do with trespassers. You can remove them. So that tends to be a good framework to use. Licenses are used for all sorts of things. When you park in a parking garage, you have a license to that parking space. When you go to a ski resort, they're, licensing you the ability to use the hill at that time. So we were in an industry that wasn't utilizing that as much as we could. So that's been my push. So I say you want to look more like a hotel and less like a mobile home park. So like we don't want tenant language. We want to make sure they've put down an address for another place they live. We don't want to receive mail for anybody. We want to be as far from an apartment as possible and as close to a hotel as possible. So that's the kind of stuff that looking at your rules and policies and discussing them with an attorney or someone who knows better to make sure that we've set ourselves up correctly is a big piece of that one. And then my last super fun one is the American with Disabilities Act.
Yes. I was going to mention this, especially in New York, the ADA lawsuit in recent years has been huge.
So they're not going anywhere. So there's a couple avenues that they come in. The one that is been around and been my nemesis for 6 years now are the website lawsuits. The same attorney that I settled a bunch of them with in 2019, I just settled another case with 2 months ago. So he's still doing these suits. It's very easy for them. They use basically the same complaint and then plug and chug the new business in it. So I always say to people, if your website developer has no idea what you're talking about when you talk about these website lawsuits, not a great web developer. They should at least be informed about what this is. But the facilities issue is actually going to crank up, I think. We in the industry kind of knew already that we should have either had a pool chair or a zero entry pool. That's supposed to be compliant. You could know about ramps and store access and things like that. But technically, there's a whole slew of things we should be doing. When we have rental units, you should have one that's ADA compliant. Like a hotel has so many percentage of rooms that are ADA compliant. You have to have a percentage of your rental units that are. Your campsites, technically, if you're new building campsites, a certain portion of them needs to be ADA compliant, which means a hard packed surface that a wheelchair could navigate around. If you have mini golf, 18 holes, 9 of them have to be ADA compliant. And I don't have a single client or know a single campground that is 100% ADA compliant right now. I just don't. But I just think that this is something that's probably going to get flagged more because there's no exception for us. People will use the term grandfathering in a lot, but in most things, there's no such thing as grandfathering in. And that's not a thing. People would also talk about having ADA plans. That was a defense. That doesn't really work either, because the crux of it is your defense was that it's like not feasible, whether economically or structurally. So I say like a brownstone in New York City, there's a lot of them that don't have elevators or ramps to them because that's just not feasible. But if I completely gutted that brownstone and started from scratch, they'd be expecting me to put an elevator in it. So I can't say, I don't have the money to have a compliant bathroom and then put in a water park. Like that's not going to fly. It might be unfun money. It doesn't look like the sexy thing on your property. But if you're investing money in your property, you also have to be investing it into ADA things. Because again, They traditionally call these kind of drive-by lawsuits, but they basically will be like, oh, I see that it's not compliant. And then they'll nab you for it. And they're always something that is settled. It doesn't make economic sense to fight them because you don't have a defense. You're compliant or you're not. So, this is another avenue where it's really easy for an attorney to come in and nail a bunch of people at one time. So I want to flag that for people that if you're investing more money into your business, please also invest it into ADA compliance.
Yeah, really great note. Definitely not a fun subject to talk about here to end today's show with the potential sort of lawsuits. And as you said, flagging issues for parks, but you're always a good word of wisdom for people. And you know it too on the back end. You operate properties. You've grown up in this space. You're very familiar with how campgrounds work. And that's, I think, why I love your legal take on it too, because you practice what you preach and you know what you're talking about in this space.
Well, I try. That's for sure.
Well, Christine, thank you so very much for joining us today and for filling in for Matt. I appreciate everybody for bearing with me being the one who had so many tech issues today, but I think we made it through it. This was a good run without Matt for this one. So, Christy, thank you again for joining us and really appreciate having you on.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. We will see you back here next Thursday, live at 10 a.m. Eastern for another edition of Good Morning Outdoors. We'll have Matt back to talk all about his conference experience and recap another great week in news. Bye, everyone. See you soon.
Want to stop juggling spreadsheets, calendars, and a dozen apps just to run your rentals? Logify makes it easy. It's an all-in-one toolkit for hosts. Build a direct booking website, automate guest messaging, and keep all your channels in sync. Running your rental business your way has never been simpler. And for Good Morning Hospitality listeners, you can get 20% off any yearly plan with code GMH20. Just check the link in the show notes to get started today.